All right. So my name is Lindy Witt, and I've never been to a training where there's anybody else with my name, so I'm excited there's 3 of us here. I've never been anywhere where there's been more than one. So I am coming to you from Las Vegas, Nevada. I did not bring that heat yesterday, but it was kind of nice, though. I have taught there for 22 years. I now work for the Center for the Collaborative Classroom as a literacy consultant part-time. So this is my first year doing that, so I've just left the classroom. My background, I have mostly taught in 5th grade, but then last year in December we had to create a kindergarten class, and so I was given that opportunity. So I've taught 5th grade and kindergarten. So I've been able to see both ends of the spectrum, and I have actually used Making Meaning and Being a Writer for the past 6-7 years, mostly in the 5th grade classroom, and then I used it last year as well in kindergarten. So when I work with teachers, I'm coming from the perspective of being in the classroom just like you are, actually using the program to kind of give you some ideas of how it does work, things you may want to think about just from a teacher perspective as opposed to, you know, being outside the classroom. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. The name of the company has changed. We just recently merged with another nonprofit organization. We are nonprofit. And we just merged with an organization called Cornerstone Literacy. And what they bring to the table is they've done a lot of work with coaching like literacy specialists or coaches, coaching people that are in the building who are supporting teachers. And so we just thought a lot of the work that they were doing was very similar to the work that we're doing. So we're really excited to be able to bring both organizations together. They've been around for about 20 years based in New York, and then we've been around for over 30 years based out of Oakland, California. But with that merge, they decided to confuse all of us and change the name. So you'll see Developmental Studies Center in all your materials, but we're now called the Center for the Collaborative Classroom. You can still go to any of the old websites. It'll just redirect you automatically, so you don't have to necessarily remember it. But just in case you see this, some of the stuff has switched out to the new name. Some of it still has the old name. We have had over $85 million in grants over the past 30 years to help support the work that we do with teachers and with districts. These are some of the funders that we have. So being nonprofit, I just think it says a lot for the company that they've been around that long and have been able to do as much work as they have been. We have also recently partnered up with the National Writing Project. I don't know if you have a local writing project affiliated with your university or college. Does anyone know? Maybe not. A lot of universities will have a local writing project, and so we've affiliated ourselves with the National Writing Project, which for us is a huge thing for us because they usually do not endorse any type of publishing company, or do they get involved with any type of programs per se. But when they started to look at what we were advocating for writing instruction with teachers, they saw that it was right in line with what they were doing with teachers when they worked with them through writing projects. And so the two have kind of decided to partner up together. So these are the goals for today. I want to take you through the Making Meaning materials. I want to give you some actual experiences with lessons that are included in there. So I'll actually take you through a lesson. Really look at what you have at your fingertips for as far as support as you start to use the program. And then this afternoon, I want to dig a little bit deeper into it to look at some of the support components, and then also talk about Making Meaning and how the two kind of work together, what similarities you might find, how things you might want to think about as you start your instruction, think about your instruction for next year. So let me just make sure I know the right thing. You just got Being a Writer materials, so you haven't used it yet, is that? Okay, perfect. And then, but couple pilots. Okay, great. And then Making Meaning you have been using this year. Is it your first year? Okay, so you're getting the revised one for next year. Okay, do you, and I won't take them right now, but would it be beneficial to give you an opportunity to ask questions about Making Meaning? Do you have some questions, things that you're wondering about? Or have you had an opportunity to get some follow-up on that? I'll let you think about that and see if you trust me. And then we can definitely maybe start the afternoon by thinking about making meaning just a little bit and maybe answering some of your questions, clarifying some things, and then we can definitely talk about the new edition and then what it would look like using being a writer as well to have both in your classroom. So, great. So I think... Gosh, it's strange to say my name. Lindy already told you that bathrooms are down the hall to your left. We will take a break in a little while, but of course, if you need to get up before then, and you can get up and get out, that's completely fine. So we're going to start off talking just a little bit about partnerships. So you know that as you use Making Meaning, one of the first things that you did was that you established partners in your classroom. The reason why we work so much with the partnerships is really one of the things I think that sets the Center for the Collaborative Classroom aside from other companies is this strong commitment to social emotional learning. And we know that the research really supports that in our classrooms, and that including that social emotional learning in our classrooms will help to increase the academics that happen in our classroom. You could probably teach both programs and not incorporate that partnership piece of it, but you won't ever get as strong results as you would if you included that. Developmental Studies Center actually started off as a character education company 30 years ago when they first started. And so they've always kind of held true to that stance, really feeling that that character education, that social piece is really, really important in our classrooms. And so they've made sure that they've embedded that into all of the programs that they have written since then. So that's why those partnerships are really, really important. We know the role that it can take on in the classroom, and it can be a challenge, but we can see some pretty great things with it if we really work with it. And it's one of the things that I appreciate about the company is they didn't just say to create a community, they actually go about showing you how to go about doing that. And when we talk about the social skills, it's not an extra 15-minute lesson. These are things that we can embed into our lessons, into the instruction that we're doing, because time is usually such an essence. We just don't have enough time usually in the day to get to everything. So for the partnerships, it's exactly the same as Making Meaning. You are going to assign kids partners at the beginning of a unit. And the idea is that we want them to stay together for the duration of the unit. And the reason why is because we want them to be able to get to know that person and to maybe come across those challenges and then have to get an opportunity to be able to figure out how to solve them. If we change partners on a regular basis, then they are not able to build up that relationship and solve those problems. When we have two kids that don't get along, what's our first, and what do we think about doing first? Yeah, splitting them up. But then who solved the problem? We did, not them. And so really thinking about ways that we can go about getting them to solve that problem and keep them together. Units are never longer really than 6 weeks, so you're looking at 4 to 6 weeks. I tell them you don't have to marry that person, you don't have to go to lunch with them, you don't have to be their best friend. You just have to deal with them for about 15 minutes every day. Now, in your case, you're going to have partners for Making Meaning and being a writer. And so one of the things that may come up this afternoon we can look at a little bit more is, do you keep the same partners? It's completely up to you. My kids could not handle dealing with that person twice in a day sometimes. But then again, maybe it would have been easier because then they wouldn't have to think about having different partners. They would learn about that child in both their reading and their writing, but sometimes it's just too hard for them. So I think that's a choice that you have to make. That's a teacher decision. If you do have separate partners for Making Meaning and being a writer, it's kind of nice to have a visual somewhere in the classroom that they can refer to because they forget and I have no clue. Who I had partnered up kids with. So just some things to start thinking about maybe. Partners should be assigned randomly. We know that in life we don't always get to pick and choose who we work with, who we have to sit next to, who lives next door to us. And so we kind of want to think about the same thing with our kids, is that we don't want to build up these social skills just for a certain group of people that they have common interests with, but they really need to be able to learn to work with everybody. And so that's where the random comes into play. The only times that I'm deliberate on how I partner up the kids would be if I have a severe behavior student, I'll put them in a group of 3. because I think they need that support. Like I had Antonio, some days he came to the floor, a lot of days he wouldn't come to the floor. So if he's just in a partnership, that leaves his partner just sitting there, where if he's in a group of 3, that allows him to at least see those model behaviors, and it doesn't leave his partners just sitting there doing nothing. They have someone to talk to. And then if I have a student that does not speak any English, then oftentimes I'll put them in a group of 3, once again for the same reason, so they have that support, they can hear the language. When they feel comfortable, they can start to participate. Other than that, I try and be as random as I can. I get parents who, this parent has a restraining order against this parent, and this, I know we get those things, and so there may be some severe situations where we can't, put 2 kids together. But for the most part, I would really challenge you to just try it to see what happens. Nothing we're asking the kids to do in the lessons are based on academics, so you don't even have to think about where they are academically. Oftentimes our strugglers can think at a much higher level than what they can actually put on paper and pencil, and so they are able to contribute to these conversations and don't have to worry about, where they are academically. And then we talked about the last one. So I'm starting with this because one of the things that we're going to do today is actually experience a lesson. And when we do our Being a Writer lessons, we do have the kids work with partners. So I'm going to have you do the same. So if you could identify a partner that is sitting right by you, someone who you could actually physically turn and talk to, if we could keep it in pairs as much as possible.
I need to lift weights.
Does anyone not have a partner? Okay. So I probably should have told you first, but you figured it out. So this is my signal. When I'm ready to have you come back together, I'll just put my hand up in the air. That's your signal to know to go ahead, finish what you're saying. I don't want to interrupt you, so finish your conversation, and then if you would turn back this way so we can come back together, whole group. If your partner can't see me because their back is to me, just politely tap them on the shoulder and let them know that we're getting ready to start. So we're going to try this out, this partnership. One of the things that I found with grades 3, 4, and 5 is that, and 6, I'm trying to remember 6th grade. And are 6th grades in the elementary schools or?
Neither are 5th grade.
Oh. Okay. All right. No, it's just interesting how everybody does something different. So one of the things that I found with kids is the first cooperative structure that you're going to teach, you taught it in Making Meaning, is turn to your partner. And so in a 5th grade classroom, when I say turn to your partner, I get this. And it doesn't last very long, and then you might go over here or somewhere else. Well, lo and behold, it happens in kindergarten too, so it's just across the board. So I have to be a little bit more deliberate when I tell my kids to turn and talk, especially in the beginning of the year, just to kind of establish it. We can have up to 35 kids in our classrooms. I don't know what your numbers are, but it's usually between 33 and 35. And so you have 35 kids talking to each other. And when they're just doing this, it's really hard to really focus in on the partner or even be able to hear them. So I will say to my kids, I want you to think about what would it look like to sit eye to eye, knee to knee. Can you show me that with your partner, sitting eye to eye, knee to knee? So at least you're in chairs that will move. Doing this like in a lunchroom on the benches is kind of difficult. But it really does help them to focus in on their partner and kind of stay in that conversation and not get sidetracked. So if I happen to say eye to eye, knee to knee, I'm not changing the structure. It's the same thing as turn to your partner. I'm just making it a little more specific for the kids. And I just have a tendency to forget and call it that. So with the eye to eye, knee to knee, I tell them they have to get as close as they possibly can without touching, because I know that's a big thing. But as close, because you'll still have some that'll turn eye to eye, knee to knee, but they're like a mile in between. And if any other reason, but space. I don't have enough space for you to not sit, but as close as you can without touching. So when I have you talk to your partner, if you could just do that in that fashion, that would help me out. There's 2 questions I want you to think about first before I give you a chance to talk to your partner. The first one is, what was writing like for you when you were in school? And the second one I'd like you to think about for just a few minutes, how do you want the writing experience to be the same or different for your students? So just think about those 2 questions for just a minute. So in just a minute, I'm going to have you turn and talk to your partner about those 2 questions. I may stop you in the middle just to remind you, if you haven't moved on from the first one, to go ahead to move to the second one. And then I'll use the signal to let you know when we're ready to come back together. So eye to eye, knee to knee, go ahead and talk to your partner about these 2 questions. If you haven't moved on to the second question, can you make sure you talk a little bit about the second question?
What I'm wondering about kind of that creative outlet or something they can be proud
So what were some of the things that you talked about? What was writing like for you when you were in school?
Writing was sometimes used as a punishment. So if you did something wrong, you had to write, I will not do this, I will not do this. Seriously, I never had to do that. I did.
Thank you. What did others talk about?
There was much more independence.
Say a little more about that.
You would really focus on your own writing and your own work. There wasn't as much sharing, or you weren't encouraged to give other people feedback necessarily.
What else?
The directions, the parameters for the writing were always very tight. There wasn't much choice in terms of what you could write. It was most could do.
And the kind of the expectation of its perfection, the spelling and the grammar, and it had to be perfect.
What did others talk about?
I don't honestly, and I think there's probably three of us in here. I shouldn't speak for others, but I don't honestly recall doing much writing.
Same here.
Maybe I got to college and then, whoa. And that probably wasn't a lot, but it was a shocker when I got there. It was the school I went to.
Writing for a lot of us was more project. We didn't do day-to-day writing. We did this big book report twice a trimester or science report or something.
We talked about writing being just a really creative thing, like you just wrote an imaginative story about anything you wanted to.
Great, thank you for sharing. So I remember a lot like you did. I don't really remember any formal writing instruction per se. I do remember creative writing, but not till 5th grade. I do remember the reports and stuff that were all of a sudden expected from me in high school, and I had no idea how to write one. I remember there was one color that was always associated with my writing. Yeah, a color that to this day I stay away from because it just gave off this negative, connotation about it. And then I thought it was said over at this table, I think was interesting, that it really was independent. Nobody ever looked at my writing but the teacher, which for me, I was okay with that. But I don't know that I necessarily had time to talk to them about the feedback. I just, it was in red writing and it was, from God, and you just made those changes. Didn't really know why, but you did it anyways. So if we think about those experiences that we had, and some were probably great, some probably have some value to them, what do we want to be the same in our classroom? Or what are some things that we want to make sure are different? What did you talk about?
Sharing with each other, people talking about the writing.
What else?
That it's fun.
What else?
Broken down into steps.
Anything else?
Or brainstorming, modeling.
Yeah. The choice, I think, is such a good one, and you'll see that in the Being a Writer program. I have control issues, so choice for me is like a word. But it's a limited choice. So we're all going to write a nonfiction report about animals, but you're going to be able to choose the animal that you want. So because we know how motivating choice is, and I know for me, sometimes I would rather work with a student that doesn't know any of their letters or sounds than work with a student that just flat out doesn't want to write, because motivation is hard to instill in the kids, especially as they get older. So I want you to keep some of these things in mind, some of these things that you want to make sure you're not doing in your classroom, and then some of the things that you do want your students to experience, as we look at the Being a Writer program, to kind of see what it has to offer students and to see where those things come into play. So I've already kind of mentioned, in the program, there are 2 goals to every lesson that you teach, and it's very similar to Making Meaning. In Making Meaning, you always are going to have some goals that are specific to comprehension, but then you also have some goals that are specific to that social piece. Same thing in Being a Writer. You're always going to have some writing goals. We want to get kids to write skillfully, creatively. We want them to write a lot, and we want them to want to write and to write in lots of different genres. And then for the social piece, we do want to help them to develop those skills so that they can learn to work with each other and really learn from each other as well. So in every lesson that you teach, you're going to see some goals that address both of those. So if you have a teacher's manual, can you pull it out? It doesn't matter if it's one or two. And if someone next to you doesn't have one, if you wouldn't mind sharing with them. And go ahead and open up to a lesson. It doesn't matter where, a day 1, 2, 3, or 4. Great. Anybody? Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Can you repeat your address?
Yeah, so open up to a lesson. It'll kind of open up to the middle once you get into a unit. You can look at a day 1, a day 2, a day 3, or a day 4. It doesn't matter. But it'll actually say day 1, day 2 on the top of it. Do you guys have some manual? Oh, perfect. It'll be like in a purple rectangular box that says the day. Keep going into one of the, yeah. All right, so if you look at that, it's going to be very similar to making meaning in that it starts off by saying, in this lesson, the students, and then it has 4 or 5 bullets. Do you see those? Okay, so if you look at those bullets, you'll very easily be able to identify which ones are specific to the academic, the writing goals, and then which ones are specific to that social piece. And once again, both of them are really important. One of the things that we're going to do with our kids, especially in the intermediate grades, is we're going to have them do a lot of the revision in partnerships. And to me, that's a scary thing because I used to do that, and it did not work. It was just a waste of time. They confer with each other. Oh yeah, your paper's good. Where does that get them? So we really want to start these social skills in the very beginning because they're really setting them up for the work that we're going to ask them to do as they continue on, especially when they get to that revision piece. And they really can do some powerful things if we set it up intentionally and really kind of cover all the basics before we get them to that point. So just so that you know, both goals are going to be covered throughout the lesson. Oh, sorry. So when you get your kit, or if you have your kit, I just want to go through the material so you can kind of think about, do I have all the pieces? Am I missing anything? The first thing that you'll find is obviously you'll find the 2 teachers' manuals. In the manuals, you'll find all of the lessons just like you see with Making Meaning. You will note that maybe it's not important to anybody else, but I did notice that in the new edition, they don't start day 2 on a new page. It may be at the bottom after day 1 finishes. Does that make sense? And it probably doesn't matter to anybody else. It just looks different than what you have with Making Meaning. But all of your lessons are in those 2 manuals. With the new edition, you also have access to your manuals electronically. So if you don't want to take your manuals home, you can access them online and be able to prepare your lessons that way. And we will look more into that this afternoon. Have you been given instructions on setting up your accounts? Okay, good to know. All right. The next thing that you will find that you should have received is between 19 and 30 trade books. And so that's kind of one of the nice things about Making Meaning is I don't have to go find these books. They're right there in my kit. Same thing with being a writer. All of your books are right there. The books that they have chosen are books that you cannot imagine teaching without, that you already have in your classroom library that you use. And then you're going to come across a couple books in there that you've never seen before. And you don't know how you went this long teaching without having those books because they are just equally as good. They've really done a nice job with the literature. Even in 4th grade, I think there's a card game that's in 4th grade because you do I think it's for the functional nonfiction writing that you do. There are some novels in there. You're not reading the entire novel, but it was the way that, probably how they had to purchase it rather than just getting the excerpt of it. Some of you may have some poetry books in there. You're not necessarily going to read the entire thing, but you are reading enough from it that they did purchase the entire book as opposed to just putting an excerpt into your manual. In addition, you don't have access to those online, but everything else you'll have access to electronically as well as your print editions. In addition to that, you have a assessment resource book. It is white and it looks like a consumable. Did anybody bring that? Because sometimes we miss that, and it has a ton of really good information in it, but it is a consumable, so like you don't want to use it as a consumable and then trash it because then it's gone. However, you do have access to everything that's in there online. In the assessment resource book, we will really dig into that quite a bit this afternoon, but it does include all of the assessments that are included for being a writer. They really have amped up the assessment resource book for this edition, so they've added a lot to it based upon teacher feedback that they got from the first edition, based upon Common Core standards. Are you a Common Core state? Yes. And based upon the fact that even though they may not believe in grades, most of us have to give a grade. And so they've found some additional ways to get grades throughout the course of the unit rather than just waiting until the very end. So they've really done a nice job with the assessment piece. In addition to that, you should have a class set of student writing handbooks. They are a consumable. The student writing handbook is not used all the time. Your lessons will let you know when you need to use it, kind of like that resource book that you have for Making Meaning. It's not a typical workbook where you can leave for the sub, do pages 19 through 20. It usually has excerpts of text that you have already read out loud to the kids that now we want them to look at a little closer. It will also have a word bank that is grade specific in it towards the back. There's a place in the word bank, it has words that are already given to them as well as pages that are blank for them to add words to. And then there are some proofreading note pages in the very back. When you get to editing in your lessons, you're going to teach some very specific grammar skills. They're going to add those skills to that proofreading page. And it kind of becomes this running record of editing skills that you can expect for them to check on their own when they get to that stage of the writing process. These are consumable. You get the first set of consumables with your kit. When you purchase the kit, after that, it's up to you how you want to go about that. But you do have access to all of it online. So, like, I just don't know how to use workbooks, so I would rather just print it out. So I was completely fine with not having to purchase that every year and just accessing it online and printing it from there. In addition to that, you have another consumable that is called the Student Skill Practice Book. And that is your grammar component. You also have a student's or a skill practice teaching guide. It's got the spiral thing, but it's thinner. Oh, I see one in the back. Can you hold it? Yeah. So that's your grammar piece, and it is in addition to what you already have in your Being a Writer manual. In the first edition, they did have a grammar component, but they never mentioned it in the manual. So I would work with schools that didn't even know they had that component. They've done a much better job in this edition, making sure that they remind you that you have that resource. You will also get notes in your lessons that will remind you and say, oh, this might be a good place to add in the student skill book and to work on this skill. So they've definitely done a good job kind of meshing the two together. So you have some specific grammar lessons in your Being a Writer manual. However, we know that oftentimes that's not enough, or our students need additional practice. So this book would allow for that additional practice. There are 30 lessons that are included. There's a scope and sequence listed in the front. They do not have to be taught in order, so you can kind of think about where your kids are at or what would make sense to teach and pull the lessons from that. In your teaching manual, there are the lessons and guided practice. And then in the consumable, there are 3 additional passages that match that skill that the students can work on either with partners or independently. So it really gives you enough for an entire week instruction on that skill if you needed that. Mm-hmm.
So has the second edition been created? We're under the understanding there's not a second edition yet for grade 6?
Right, they're right now in the works of getting that done.
Okay,
Yeah. But K-5 was just revised, and they're working on 6 right now. So, and I'm going to find out by the end of the day when it's going to be done.
One more question.
Sure.
So the grammar, everything that you're telling us about in consumables is available online, including the grammar?
Yes. Yeah. But grade 6, you might be able to get it on a CD, so you can print it out from the CD. So can you guys make me a list of questions just that are grade 6, and I can email at lunch and find out for you guys, yeah? Is there anybody else 6th grade? Okay, perfect. So, perfect. So just let's make a list of questions that we have for grade 6, and I will get an email out, and we'll figure those things out. In addition to all of these materials, you also have something that is brand new, and it's called the Writing Performance Task Preparation Guide. What kind of testing do you guys do for your students at the end of the year? Okay, I'm hearing MC. Oh, okay.
Testing and NWE math testing
Okay.
throughout the year, and then MCAs.
Okay. So we have this additional piece that we've just included this year, and there will be one that they're writing for 6th grade as well. It's only designed for grades 3, 4, and 5, and it's designed to help prepare students for those types of standardized tests that require them to have a written response. In the 3 areas, personal narrative, expository nonfiction, and opinion. So there's a week's worth of lessons for each of those 3 types of genres. Now, you've already taught your authentic unit on how to write a personal narrative. Now we're going to do a week of what if you had a personal narrative writing task that you had to answer where you're kind of being told what you have to answer. This is what you need to use from what you learned about writing personal narratives, and this is how it might be a little different because it is more on-demand writing. And they do walk them through how to analyze the text, how to take notes, how to synthesize the information, and then come up with that written piece. So it's really kind of smart that they thought this through, being that we have our kids that have to go and take these kind of tests. And so now there's a piece that isn't necessarily taken away from our authentic writing instruction, it's just adding to it and showing them what pieces of that instruction they will want to use, but then again acknowledging that it is going to be a little bit different for them and helping them to see those differences. So that piece is included as well. Hi.
Thanks for letting me know.
Sure.
And thanks everyone. And make sure that you ask lots of questions and make the most of today. I did just hear this writing piece, so we don't have a statewide writing test.
Perfect.
Remember we used to with Mr. Test? So that would be what this would be doing your writing.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And we're going to go this afternoon. Since there's all these computers, we're hoping we can just get online and get you guys set up.
Okay.
We'll make sure we make time for that today.
That's with our reps code, right? That one.
Actually, all we'll need is a zip code of who purchased the materials. So yeah, as long as we know the zip code, they should be able to get in and create accounts today. Yeah.
So maybe, yeah, and actually I think that's what I was asking, because we also, I was thinking something different. We also have access now.
Yeah.
Which that needs the extra special.
Yes.
But I can share that with you as well if you have time.
Perfect.
Because there's more things there, you know, that we but, so with, I need to say you, and who should I send with their all of them? Who wants to wait? I mean, we said
For making meaning. For making meaning or...
for being a writer now, sorry, I switched back to that.
I'll tell you what, I'll send you a direction sheet for being writer when I finish today, and then if you could just shoot it out to everybody. But I'm going to actually have them get online today and create the accounts.
Okay.
So we should be okay, yeah. Great.
We'll be around the week if you go for right now.
Great.
Keep notes, and we'll be back.
Thank you. So these are all the materials that you have. The only other thing that you need for writing instruction would be notebooks for the students, and then something to write with. So what questions do you have about your materials? So one of the things that you'll want to do is really go back and look through the materials that you're given to make sure that you have everything. And then you can let your district reps know if you're missing something so they can get in contact with the local rep and they can make sure that they get you those materials so you're ready to go in the fall. All of these materials, again, with the exception of the literature, you will have access to online. In addition to the everything being online, you will also be able to, you won't have to create charts anymore. You can pull the charts up either as an interactive whiteboard so you can manipulate it, or you can pull it up as a PDF and just print it out. All of the excerpts are included in there that would have been in the student writing handbook. Those are all online. You can literally just put in that I'm on this genre, week, whatever, day, whatever, and it'll bring up all the materials that you need, and everything's right there, so you need to print it out or just bring it up for your students. All of the grammar is done through interactive whiteboard activities as well, so that you can access that way. For grade 6, on this side over here are the revisions that they are making to the teacher's manual. They are adding a functional writing unit. The assessment resource book, they are definitely going to add more pieces to that, and you may even want to take a look at like a 5th grade one just to kind of see what it looks like. They're adding some trade books. The student writing handbook will be there. The teaching guide, they've done a lot, or the student practice teaching guide, that's the grammar piece. They've really beefed that up quite a bit. As well as the digital resources. You will eventually have access to all of that, and put that on that list because I'm going to email that question today to kind of find out when you guys will get that. But I'd really encourage you to, if you can't, I think there's some stuff already on there for grade 6, but let's look today, and if not, we'll get you on to see what the 5th grade looks like, just so you have an idea. So what questions do you have about your materials? Yes?
So, are there places where we can see which standards each lesson covers?
Great question. So they're not included in the manuals, but you can go online, and they've correlated the entire thing. And you can filter it however you want. You could even say, I'm teaching this week, what are all the standards I'm covering, or even by day, by unit, and you have access to that. You can print it out or just access it online as you need it. What other questions do you have about the materials? I only use the 1st edition because this one just came out this year, and I am so impressed with the work that they've done in this 2nd edition. Everything that we wanted in the 1st edition, they've made sure that they've included in the 2nd edition. So it's really kind of a nice resource to have. I think you'll like some of the pieces, and we'll continue to look at everything that it has to offer as we continue on. Any other questions? And as you think of questions, just let me know, and we'll address those as we go. So I want to talk just a little bit about where this is coming from, and then I'm going to take you through a lesson so it'll make it a little more interactive. Everything that we do is based on research. We know that in our classrooms that in order for us to have best practice going on, we have to be have the way that we go about our instruction being research-based. So a couple of things that they looked at when they looked at what does the research say about best practices in writing instruction. And the first one is that we know that we have to build on the students' motivation to kind of get them going with their writing, and that we have to provide them with time to write every single day. When you look at the Common Core standards, they have really leveled out the playing field for both reading and writing. No longer is reading the most important. They both have 10 anchor standards. And so really calling us to make sure that we're doing the same thing in our classrooms, and that we are making sure that we are devoting a good chunk of time to writing. I think there was such a push for reading that a lot of times it was just, there were so many things they were asking us to do in reading, it was hard for us to have that equal time for writing. But now they are realizing the importance of writing, because really writing is that avenue by which the students are able to communicate what it is that they are thinking. And so we do need to make sure that we have writers in our classroom. And so in the Being a Writer program, you do have opportunities for students to write on a daily basis. We know that the research says that we need to make sure that we expose our students to those published works and that we use that kind of as a mentor to help the students understand these different things in craft of writing. And so we've already talked about the books that you have included in your kits that really do help to get those ideas and to see examples of things that we want our students to do in their writing. The other thing that they've done is that they've looked at these authors and given the kids a snapshot of what's happening, how these authors go about their writing process. So in grade 4, you look at Betsy Byers and you learn some of her habits that she has when she goes about writing. In grade 5, you look at John Sheska, who wrote The Stinky Cheese Man and the True Story of the Three Little Pigs, and you find out what he was like as a kid, which makes complete sense when you read his books. And then you find out he talks about when he wrote the Time Warp Trio, which is a really thin set of novels, but how many reams of paper he went through just for revision. So it builds on authors that the kids would know, that they would be interested in, but kind of gives you an insight to what their writing process looks like. We are going to guide students through the writing process. So in every unit that you teach, students are going to have opportunities to brainstorm, draft, revise, edit, and then finally have that publication. We really set the stage for the writing process in units 1 and 2, and then after that, all the units are going to make sure that they always have that same format set up, so the kids will be going through the writing process in every unit. And then the research tells us that skills and conventions are really important, but they're most understood when they come into play in the writing process, when it's done in context. So if you think about that writing process, which is right here, where do skills and conventions come into play? Oh, sorry. Goodness gracious. At the beginning or at the end of the process? At the end. So you're going to go a couple weeks teaching lessons and you're not going to see any lessons on editing because you're probably in the pre-writing drafting stages. But once you get towards the end of the unit, then you're going to start seeing those revision lessons. You're going to start seeing the editing lessons. So they are there, but they're going to happen when they come into play in the writing process. Now, is that going to be enough for our kids? For me, my kids, it wasn't. I did have to supplement with the grammar lessons on a daily basis, but I tried to think about which grammar skills made sense to teach within the context of the writing that we were doing. So if you're teaching fiction, it makes sense to teach quotation marks because you know they're going to use them and probably wrong a million times. So it makes sense to teach it at that time. The other thing that they do with conventions that I'd never really thought about that really helped with my students was to help them understand the purpose of conventions. Conventions are not for the writer. The writer knows exactly what they put on that page, and they can read it to you. They don't need those conventions necessarily. Conventions are really for the reader. And so helping kids to see that you're not cleaning this up just because I'm a pain and I'm making you do it. You want someone to read your piece. And in order for somebody to read your piece, we've got to clean up these things so that they're able to do that. I will send you the PowerPoint, so we don't do copies anymore, but I will send it to the district contact and I'll make sure that they get it out to you so you don't feel like, I don't want you to feel like you have to take notes on everything. I'll make sure you get a copy of this. So the next part, I'm going to take you through a 4th grade lesson, and just so that you can really experience what it might feel like for the students on that end of it. Oftentimes we only participate in lessons as the teacher, and so we see it from that perspective. But it's important for us to think about it from the learner perspective, to kind of see what happens during this lesson to support me as a writer. And so I'm going to take you through a lesson that comes in grade 4, and it's a personal narrative unit. So you all have a personal narrative genre unit, but this particular one happens to come from grade 4. If you are a grade 4 teacher and you were to follow along, you would probably see some differences because of, we've kind of condensed it or modified it slightly because of the setting that we're in, but you'll get the gist of what's happening. So if you would take your manual actually and go ahead and open up to your personal narrative genre unit that you have. It's probably your 3rd unit after unit 1 and 2. and it'll be in volume 1. So the first thing that you'll see is a page that looks like this, just a quick narrative that explains what's happening in the unit. And sometimes this is just helpful just to kind of have an idea of where they're going with this genre, so that even though I'm only thinking right now about week 1, I kind of have an idea of where it's going by the end of the unit. The next document that you will see is called Development Across the Grades. Can you see if you can find that one in your personal narrative unit? Should be on the next page. So what they've done here is they've kind of given us an idea of, when we think about this specific genre of personal narrative, what has happened previously in instruction and where is this instruction going? So if I have students who are struggling in my classroom, I can go back and, let's say I'm a 4th grade teacher, I can go back and look to see what was covered in grades 1, 2, or 3 to maybe fill in some of those gaps to help them out. If I have students who are ready to move on, I might want to be able to look to that next grade level to kind of see where it's going, to see how I can push them forward or extend that. So these are included for your genre units, and I just think it's so helpful because as a 5th grade teacher, I knew the 5th grade standards, but honestly, I couldn't tell you what anybody else's were. So this kind of let me know what was done previously and then where it's going, and to kind of help me see kind of where my instruction falls in within all of that. So the next page that you'll see is a unit overview. And the unit overview kind of lays out the entire unit for you, giving you more information. It has the number of weeks, the number of days, and it lets you know what the focus is, the books that you're using, and a couple of the procedures that you're doing. One of the things that I want you to look at is how the unit is designed. So if you notice, there's 2 gray rectangular rows that go across it. This kind of divides the unit up into 2 phases. So in this unit, in the first phase, this is at the immersion and the drafting stage of the writing process. So if we're thinking about the writing process, all we're going to do in the first 2 weeks is immerse them in personal narratives and give them opportunities to start some drafts. And that's really, really, really important, and you may even want to jot it down on a sticky note, because a lot of times I'll work with teachers, they get through week 1 and week 2, and they're not seeing a finished product, and they put the whole thing away because it doesn't take them through the writing process. I'm not getting anything out of it. It's there. It just doesn't happen in the very beginning. It's coming, though. So in the first 2 weeks, we're just reading lots of personal narratives to them. They're trying things out. There will be lots of days they try something and they don't ever go back to it. But think about those kids in your classroom who start something and you know it's bad right from the get-go, and yet you still have to keep pushing them through it. It's kind of nice that they're going to have that choice to go back to something that they really think they can improve upon, as opposed to a piece that you know isn't going to go anywhere. Okay, at the beginning of week 3 in this one, you'll see that this is the second phase of the unit. So now we're going into the last 3 stages of the writing process. We're going to revise, proofread, and then have a published piece. So what they do on week 3, day 1, they reread everything they wrote in weeks 1 and 2. They pick one of those pieces that they wrote that probably isn't finished, and that's okay, but one that they think they can improve upon and that they want to work on to be able to share as that final piece. They're committing to that piece, and now they're going to take that piece, and there will be revision lessons, editing lessons for the proofreading, and then they will have a final piece at the end of the unit. What questions do you have about the way it's kind of set up? Yes?
I just have a question. We've been working with Making Meaning here, and we have a reading mentor text almost, every day, or at least in the first 3 lessons. How do you, since you've done both, how do you incorporate and do 2 mentor texts, one for Making Meaning and then one for being a writer in the same day? And fit it all in?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I didn't know if that would be important or if that was just like something that was just important to me. Yeah. Eventually I got used to it and it was fine. I did not teach them necessarily right back to back. And so I've worked with some teachers that kind of stagger it out. So oftentimes you're reading the mentor text on day 1, oftentimes. So they would try and stagger it so it wasn't a day one writing and reading lesson, and that may help. In my schedule, we just didn't do them back to back so that there was some time in between. And honestly, they got fine. They were okay with it. But I thinking about some of those things to kind of stagger it a little bit more may be helpful, or not teaching it back to back if that's an option. I know for some people they can't. They have to. They will get better at it, though. They will. Yes.
So what is the time frame you allow for
We're gonna,
each of these days?
yeah, we're going to get to that. I promise. Yeah, yeah. What do you have allocated right now? Okay.
We have an hour and a half in sixth grade for,
Everything, right? Yeah.
8 minutes one day,
and then
and double that the next day.
so it's about an hour and a half a day if you look at it that way.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we're coming back to the time, I promise. Yeah. All right. So the lesson that I'm going to demonstrate for you comes from week 1, day 3. So what we're doing in this beginning is we're establishing what a personal narrative is. We're going to be creating a chart that has personal narrative elements on it so they know what has to be included in a personal narrative. We are reading lots and lots of personal narratives to them, and they are starting some drafts. It's okay if they don't finish. They're just trying things out. And so that's where you're going to see the lesson that I'm going to demonstrate with you in just a minute. So as I demonstrate the lesson, I'm going to ask a couple things out of you. First of all, so that you can really get the full experience, I'm going to ask that you participate as a student would. A really well-behaved student who's not hot or upset they have to be to school today, or have y'all had spring break? Yes. Oh, you already had it? Oh, how nice. Or not thinking about spring break or the end of the year. But I also know that since you're a really well-behaved student, you can also multitask. So I know that as you're participating in this role as a student, you're also going to have all these teacher things that are going through your head. And so what I would ask that you do is that as you think of those teacher things, can you jot those down on a Post-it note? Because I don't want to stop the lesson to address those. I want you to be able to feel the whole entire lesson, kind of let it go all the way to the end, and then we will definitely take some time to answer those questions. I just won't do it throughout the lesson. So if you'll stay as a student, I'll stay in the teacher role. The other thing that I would ask is that as I have you turn and talk to your partner, can you really talk about whatever question I gave you, not how much longer till lunch, or what do I have to be here? Or, because I want you're actually going to have to do some writing. And so if you were talking about lunch, it's probably not going to pertain to your writing per se. And for us to really understand the lesson, it would just help you to do that. As well as we're going to come back to your writing so I can show you what revision looks like and editing. And if you haven't written anything, then we won't be able to do that. So what questions do you have before we start the lesson? Do you need a quick break, or do you want to wait till after? A quick break just to stretch and cool off a little bit? All right, so I'll give you another one, so can this one just be like a really, really quick one? So like 5 minutes, is that good? Okay. Thank you. I will. Thank you. Hi.
What
Yes.
software are you using that's tracking you as you're moving around with the
I have no idea. I was just told that I had to wear this thing right here, and
camera? So it follows that?
yeah. Oh wait, actually, let me turn it off.